9/11, I don't know how, have you been up here a long time? Because before 9/11, it was very different. And,
We did it.
Well, before Roy Anderson got busted in his boat over there.
What's that?
For anchoring when he was fishing.
Yeah, but prior to 9/11, you know, it was so casual going.
It blew the whole bloody thing up.
Yeah.
Well, that was after that, but it was so casual.
Yeah.
Just go over there and go to dinner and come home, and you know, knew everybody, They would be over here. It was no big deal.
And all of a sudden, it's just like you can't get past Lake of the Isles.
Let me ask
Go
you
take in your
something.
prop bill.
Does anybody check in when you come back from Canada?
I have volume 2.
I do.
Okay.
Oh.
Yep, so we're good, yep.
Oh, good.
Glad everybody has
Thank you.
a
Thank you.
Alright, well, that took 20
My
minutes.
goodness.
Well,
Well, at least we got it.
yeah.
Alright. So I know that there was a lot of emails going around,
They were all read.
I
I think they were all read as well, maybe not responded to vigorously.
Awesome, and I know that Jerry, you know, made some of the
Corrections,
changes
yeah.
and corrections. You know, some of my comments were just sort of housekeeping type stuff. But does,
The one thing I will say, Stacy, on like the New York State DEC law,
Yeah.
the 10 o'clock fire out thing was added by us, that's not in DEC.
right,
okay?
actually,
So-
I did notice that the DEC did not,
Right.
did not specify the 10 PM.
But I thought we talked about that.
Yeah,
so.
and I think it's probably, you know, like I said, with some of the stuff we should leave in and then let the attorneys say, well, you
Okay.
can do that,
Yep.
you can't do that.
That's a good
But
idea.
I think it just goes back to, you know, our be a good neighbor type of.
You're just, the only
Concept.
problem is you're lumping every property and every situation into a box that maybe the majority of them do, but there's those that would never have a problem with that. They're on an island, they have other
Right.
properties and that.
Right.
If people wanna come and enjoy themselves till 2 o'clock in the morning and sit there and just chat around the fire, they ought to be able to do so. And
Right,
that's a problem, because it's really causing, that's gonna cause a lot of stress, I think. And I don't know, that's the problem with so many of these things, that you can't put everything into a box. It's
right,
just-
and there are so many different types of properties
Right.
that,
And I don't know, I mean, this is getting pushed, but it'd have to get done and then have to take each thing and think about it a little more, and all the exceptions and how you could handle it without burdening the town and enforcement, or putting everybody so contained that, I would be very upset if I had a rental and I didn't have a problem with neighbors and that. And I have properties that would qualify for that. They're not in service, but they may be someday or something.
Right.
But if my tenants wanna sit out there, I don't care, that's fine.
well, again, I
Yeah.
know the properties that we have rented, that has been the regulation, is.
If they're in a certain density, here,
Well, we've been in, you know, larger homes where you're on, I don't know, a third to a half of an acre, you know, with trees and woods between you and the next property, but still, at least that particular landlord, because I think this is before STR laws,
yeah.
you know, maybe because there were noise ordinances or whatnot, but we had to have our fire extinguished by 10, and, you know, not to say that you can't be outside, but I think it's just making a point of everybody to be aware that, look, by 10 o'clock, you know, yeah, you can sit outside, but you're wanting to keep the volume, and the party.
Well, we deal with that all the time, and the sitting around a fire with friends and that I mean, it's a big deal. And, I've had people, well, we talked about that, that have some different situations, where they can get upset with one another, but basically.
Your commercial area is more like a campground.
No, it isn't, it's residential.
not.
No, all homes. There's no camping, there's no short term.
Trailers?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
all homes, for us, all seasonal. I don't do any short term at all in that regard. But that said, people, you know, we enforce and people respect that when the sun goes down, it's just kind of our rule, and everybody understands it. When the sun goes down, just the voices go down. You can still be out, enjoy yourself. Whether the fire's lit or not, I don't know that that's germane. I don't know how that would bother anybody. You know, but it's the noise issue that usually is the problem,
And we can't address that.
It's the noise issue, and it's also the issue that as it gets later at night and there's been more drinking going on, there's less
well, maybe in some cases
responsibility and attention to a fire. You know, you have the
Have we ever had that issue?
Yes.
The thing is
We
that,
have had where our neighbor's fire pit has been still smoldering in the morning.
yeah,
Well, that's a separate issue. They put it out at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. That's the same issue. I mean, that doesn't, having them stop at 10 o'clock doesn't solve that issue, putting out the fire. You know, and I've had an issue where it's not put out properly and it smolders and you get the soft gassing and it stinks and you get the call. That's a hard thing to regulate.
I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're doing this is that, you know, these STRs are new, and now they're coming into some densely populated areas, where people still have to get up and go to work in the morning, because
Well,
they're not on vacation.
absolutely.
So when you have
That's
a
an issue.
commercial area, and you're there at a hotel, and people are expecting this commercial, you know, like even in Clayton where they have those beautiful gas fire pits, you know, you're expecting that that's what your vacation's going to be. But once you take your personal vacation and you bring it into a residential neighborhood, it's no longer, you're not really having your vacation.
Right, I would agree,
like
but there's nothing in here to make a
walking around.
distinction, which is the point I made to begin with, between the different sets of circumstances.
Well, that
You know.
becomes a zoning issue for the town,
Right.
which happened which we just passed to you from North Elba and Lake Placid.
This is not North Elba, and we have a vastly different set of circumstances.
You're asking how to solve that issue,
Yeah.
and that's
And
how
they're
you
in the
solve it.
woods, and they are dense, you know, the residential areas are dense. Yeah, and I mean, like in the village, I understand, you have all the homes adjacent to one another, and it's very easy to disturb somebody
Right.
without ever intending to do so, I get that.
But still giving them the opportunity to have your bonfire and your campfire. No one's saying you can't have it, but you can have it up to a certain point. So you're actually taking into consideration the people who live there, have to
So
get
what
up the
about
next
somebody
morning.
renting an island? What about somebody that's on, you know, I mean,
Well, and
there's
then
places that are at
Jerry's
least
point-
out, that are hundreds and hundreds of feet away from
Right,
any residential
right.
areas
Then
or.
the Jerry's
Well, as
point, it
long as
goes
nobody's
back to
bitching at
zoning.
you, who cares?
Well,
Right,
yeah, I'm just
that's-
trying, well, my only thought is that there's nothing in here to make a distinction to
Right,
allow.
because we haven't addressed zoning.
Right.
Right.
We haven't
I think
addressed
a lot of this goes to
restriction,
zoning.
restricted areas like North Elba and Lake Placid did. We had to a certain extent because we've excluded the village.
Only because they don't wanna jump on board with us.
Well,
They wanna do-
the village excluded themselves.
Right, they
You don't exclude the
excluded
village.
themselves.
So in that regard,
Right,
we've started.
Yeah, but
Right.
they said they're going to,
Right.
they wanna see what problems come down when this is
but I
proposed.
think compromise is really the issue.
I'm sorry.
Compromise is really the issue. You can have your bonfire, and you can have it till 10 o'clock at night, which is still a good hour after the sun goes down. But it should be extinguished if you're in a residential neighborhood, and a lot of these STRs are in residential neighborhoods. But you can't just say, again, the zoning issue, unless we decide we're gonna do some bits and pieces of zoning, which is, again, something we have to discuss. But it's a compromise. You can have the fire, but you can have it till 10 o'clock. And that also addresses issues of potential, I'm not saying always and all the time, potential noise issues. That once the fire's out and then it starts getting cold, people start going back inside, blah, blah, blah.
Would you feel better if it said 11 o'clock?
Yeah, I might.
It's not, yeah, I would too, but it's not, that wasn't the point. The point is
Well, I
that,
understand your
that-
point, but do we wanna go down that road?
I mean, till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning?
no, I think,
No, I don't
no.
You know,
What I'm saying is that
appropriate.
I'm not sure how this could be parsed, and, you know, again, we're talking an hour and a half every month, or every 6 weeks, or two times a month, and it's hard to draw up something that's.
Well,
has
that's why we've
sufficient
been working when we're
I
not
know,
here.
there are many circumstances and situations in here that would not, that could do other things, that are restricted in here, like the fires, that wouldn't affect anybody, enhances the value of the rentals. compared to, maybe I wanna have a fire and I wanna sit up with my friends and I wanna sit out at night and have a good time and relax, and I'm not talking about disturbing anybody, and I understand I can't do that in the village. So when I'm looking for a place, I'm not gonna be in the village. And if those things are posted, which I would have to think that you would want to do, so you know before you go there, what you're going to be able to do and not
You just made an absolutely excellent point. You just absolutely made a phenomenal point in that before someone who wants to have a campfire and people sleeping out in their tents and people sleeping in whatever, their kids and blah, look for a place that would accommodate that type of
But
thing.
this outlaws it town-wide, so it doesn't matter, you can't. That's my point.
10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, I mean, it's.
If you go down to my place, you can stay out all night, it doesn't matter, as long as you're not disturbing somebody else. Well, I say my place, I'm saying that there are places, you know, there are I don't wanna name names, but there are places that are off in a way that could do that without a problem, and it enhances, look, I don't wanna limit people's, this is their livelihood.
So how do we create a solution in this with places that it's not bothering people can stay out and not be breaking the law?
Right.
Okay, so
Versus having some limitation in other areas where it causes a problem.
let me ask you this question. So, scenario, people are sitting out in one bay, well, not even, because that's more commercial, but they're sitting in a place where they have an open field, people are away, there's trees, blah, 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 and this law is in effect, and nobody makes a complaint. And then the next group of people come in, and now it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, but nobody's making a complaint because there's nobody around to respond, even though it's in the law. The fourth or fifth time somebody comes there, and now they've got a bonfire, and now somebody makes a complaint. Well, here they can go and say, listen, this has been going on, we haven't complained, it hasn't really been an issue until now. So then they go to the enforcement officer and say, listen, it's in the law, letting you know, you can't be having bonfires until after 10 o'clock. You can't be doing it. It doesn't become a problem until somebody makes a complaint, and then it has to be addressed. But if no one's making the complaint, and people are still out there doing their reasonable bonfire, or campfires until a reasonable hour of the night and not affecting anybody's sleep, it's not bothering anybody. It's only until somebody gets beyond what's being reasonable that it becomes a problem. And then you wouldn't have a complaint if it's reasonable. You wouldn't have residents complaining if it was reasonable.
Unless you have somebody that just wants to be a jerk,
You know,
because, you know, your dog was over here or whatever.
And that's
I know,
why.
I agree, I agree.
That's why.
But that's hard to
Why is there an
defend
objection?
if it's written X.
Why would there be an objection to writing it so if you're in a set of circumstances where you can be more relaxed, then be more relaxed? You know, why does it have to, and it's like that throughout, why does it have to be that contained?
Because
I don't understand what the objection would be.
what's the word I want? Not judgment, but,
Subjective.
subjectivity.
No, I think it could be written, so I have to think about it, you know,
Right.
and
different
I do
circumstances,
too. I
but
mean, you
if
know.
there's a certain density, I don't know how you would be
Right.
worded.
Right.
But if there's a, you know, below a certain density, you know, these are the restrictions. And if it's over here, then you're more relaxed.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, again, that becomes a zoning issue. You're zoning out certain areas that
Well, that's part of the
isn't
law that-
acceptable, and.
But zoning doesn't come down to these small, zoning's broad. It has to be by its nature.
It certainly can be.
And
No,
you could have an area like this with a couple of places in the middle that you could go out there till 4 in the morning and nobody even know you're there. But if you go 400 yards, 500 yards over here, where you've got houses every, you know, with 10 feet between them,
Right.
it's a different ball of wax.
That's a problem.
But that's gonna have to be in the same zoning area, because they can't
Right.
carve up the map and find it.
Right.
So I think, you know, one option might be to say, by 10 o'clock at night, if you're on a certain size parcel or within a certain distance to neighboring properties or neighboring houses.
I think it take a little thought to get it right.
Right,
You know, but
I do too, but
I
if
just-
it's along the lines
There's
of that.
so many things that, you know.
The other
islands-
thing is-
Yeah, you could be on an
Here,
island,
there's
you could
places
be
rentals
out
for the
on
summer.
an acre, parcel and there's nobody
Right,
around
right.
and you're not bothering
Right.
anybody.
Places on the other side of Route 12 here, a lot of them, that,
So,
here,
within
they
how
don't
close
bother
to a
anyone.
neighbor, I mean,
What's that?
within how close to a neighbor would you say that?
Well, I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just,
And
Okay.
the other thing is too, we're exploring a lot of parameters here that maybe at this point in time, we're not gonna come up with the finite solution.
Agreed,
Right.
But we're starting to develop a framework,
I agree, 100%.
and you create that framework, which we pretty much have, and adjust as necessary going down the road.
I agree, this
What-
is not in stone,
Not
this
right.
is not in
This is
stone.
not
if-
final.
Right.
What if our good neighbor policy had that in there? Would that suffice to at least put people on notice, and then we could
It's a
take it out as
guidance
a...
document.
The guidance document as opposed to
that's where the
enforcement.
subjectivity comes into it, so,
So in the good neighbor policy, again, going back to North
Right.
Elba and Lake Placid,
Yeah.
it says, campfires are not allowed after 10 PM within the boundaries of the village. So,
That's that.
so that, even though this is a town-wide, ordinance, it's only within the village.
so how would you be affected, because you live next to one? And
We would be adversely affected,
you would be adversely affected.
because our neighbor is, we share
So
a
it'd
common wall.
you had to be worded not by, maybe not circumscribing a particular village or zone or district,
But I
but
think it's
be
just-
clear with, you're within so much distance
That's what I
of
said.
somebody, of a
Right.
neighboring property, then, you know, you know, you're more, the rules that you follow for certain things are more restrictive because they need to
Let me
be.
give you an example. Where we are, and we actually moved our fire pit, and we bought a commercially made fire pit, one of these
The smokeless?
smokeless, yeah.
Yeah, we got one too.
And it's not a solo, it's a
not
Brio,
a
but I'm
Solo,
not,
okay.
I'm not advertising Brio, even though it's American steel, made in America, not going in. But the thing is, if the wind is such that it's taking it right into my neighbor's house, we don't have a fire.
Right, right, but you're not there on vacation for a week, and you're a responsible resident who lives there, who cares about your neighbors, and we're talking about
But
people who
that's
are on
the kind,
vacation.
maybe that's some of the things. Be aware of your smoke threat. Or words that make it more plain than that. With this, with the good neighbor policy,
Yes.
granted, it's, we're not putting a
That's a tough
penalty
one.
on it,
It
but
is.
it's making,
Very tough.
but it may be making people aware.
Aware.
And it's up to the landlord, and it's not hard to do as a landlord to make this document front and center
Right.
to the people that you're charging to be there. And I think a lot of times, that can be an effective tool.
And actually, if you think about it, a lot of this goes back to the landlord and how responsible the landlord is gonna be.
Absolutely.
Again, you know, many of us here have rental properties, and we are responsible landlord and property owners, so we explain to our tenants, you know, what we expect of them. But then there's landlords that don't. So I think, I mean, a lot of this is gonna go back to the landlord if they wanna maintain their permit.
Well, I think that what you said earlier is that this is fluid, pretty much. We're writing it down, we're trying to get some kind of foundation, some kind of structure. It's going to be passed by the attorney and the board. They're going to make adjustments to it, they're going to send it back. We're probably going to have to reconvene at some point, put in so all these things that we're talking about, it can't hamper us and tie our hands right now.
Right.
Because we have to get through this somehow, and it can be adjusted in the future. But I don't want to be here in July working on this because we can't get past, is it 10 o'clock, is it 11 o'clock, is it 1 o'clock?
So what if we put a question mark in this paragraph, to be determined by the proximity to your neighboring building?
So
And-
fires
and
should
you-
not be unattended, and must be fully extinguished by 10 o'clock if you're in close proximity.
You're in close proximity to your neighbors,
And close proximity is not gonna fly with any attorney.
Right.
It's not, they're not
That's
gonna.
okay.
It's gotta be specific.
Right,
It's
but
gotta
let
be.
them, but let them come back and say, if you want to go along those lines, this is the way it needs to be worded.
I mean, you can have distances in that, I mean, I'm gonna back into this. If I had a fire here and wind's blowing there and you're down that way, how far away before it dissipates to the point where you really wouldn't be affected by it?
There's no air at all, it just hangs over top of that, like a cloud.
I'm sitting there,
And-
how far away?
and again,
You know, 300 feet, 500 feet, I mean, that's,
100 feet.
Our
You're saying if you're 100 feet
issue
away from the
hasn't
fire, you
been
wouldn't-
as
you wouldn't
much as
notice
it's
it?
been
Sure you would.
Yeah.
noise, but to your point.
so some
be careful.
reasonable
Right.
distance, even
Right.
if it's double that or something,
That's-
then that allows those that on the island, you know, and I'm always uncomfortable with, well, you know, you're not gonna get in trouble if somebody blows you in. Well, I'm not gonna get a speeding ticket doing 120 until you happen to see me, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I should be able to do that. And
I'm not saying that, I'm just talking the reality of life is that.
no, I know that.
It's,
Yeah.
you know, to be reasonable,
Right.
and that's what I'm trying to do, is to compromise, be reasonable. If I was on vacation, you know, the thing is understand that these people are on, they work all year long, and now they've got their 1 week vacation, and they're spending all the money, because they've saved up for it, and they're gonna have a blast.
That's right.
In a highly densely residential area where people have to get up the next day and go to work. They're not going to Disneyland or to the resort.
Well, no, I'm not arguing that they should be able to do that. I'm saying that there are many circumstances where they're not, people that want to look for a place where they can be more relaxed and do the things they want to do ought to be able to do them.
Right.
And
You're right.
taking
It's not
this
an
and
issue.
blanking it over everything and imposing it on everybody is not the way to go. It's just not. You know, so the further up you go the chain with government, the more everybody's got to follow in
Yeah,
this little box, and it
yeah.
doesn't work, so everybody gets away with it until they get caught. You know, and
Right, and
it's just as easy to address it now. I know you want to get this
Right.
done, but at the same time,
But we could do this, honestly, Al, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying that for the sake of being, expediting this, we've been doing this, and you've been here every single time, and I appreciate that, believe me, I do. The thing is we had to do something, and if we say it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever, let the board, let them do it. We're putting the ribs in, let them put the guts in it, and tell us what we can or cannot do. Because we could pick apart the septic, we could pick apart the electric, we could sit here and re-pick apart everything all over again, and I don't want to do that.
While we're on that too, with regard to the permit and the application, I think that can come later. I think we need to put this out.
I agree.
Get this
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I've got a building permit in my window. Are you kidding me? It's a comic book.
Yeah.
And the permit wasn't, or the application is not complicated.
Right.
We can whip that up
Right.
once we find out what we're applying it to.
There's already templates online.
Yeah,
There's
but-
things that I really want to address, and I don't mean to cut you off, Al.
no, it's fine.
I'm not trying to say
It wasn't just about this one, it was all the
general,
stuff
that's an
here.
example.
You know, not whether you should have a fire extinguisher, not whether your electric got to have GFIs or, you know, whatever. It was these more general things that are so limiting to people trying to feed your families and pay for the properties and
And
stuff.
Stacy talked about the dogs. I mean, you know, can you have a dog? This is really good for hunters. Keep your dog off the leash. There's no leash law in Alexandria Bay. And then,
Well, I don't know why that can't put that in there, because I don't know why, because if you don't have a leash law, why can't that be in here? Then if you're coming in and you have a dog pet, it's got to be properly
Should be.
tagged and on a leash at all times,
and some
period.
people are like, I don't want my dog to be on the
Then
leash.
don't come.
And if I
You
want
know,
fires till 1 o'clock in the morning, then this is not the place for you.
Well, if it's not allowed in this particular area, then rent someplace over here where you can
Yeah.
be away from everybody. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with just blankety blank restricting it to, so
Yeah.
take the,
We do have a leash in there.
yeah.
Yeah, we did put
No,
it-
no, I know, I'm just throwing things out, you know, just,
Right.
so, anyways.
But there's
diverse
something
town.
that I'd really like to talk about, is the point that Stacy was making relative to the multiple dwellings. And I just want to make a case in point, and I did say it, I didn't want to offend anybody, and if I did offend, I apologize, that we all are here because we had interests in these STRs. For whatever, and what your interest is, Al, and Sky, and Stacy, and our interest, there are other people who have the same interests. So we
Right.
actually represent, even with, whether we know it or not, other people's and what they care about. So, we're here working on this, and the thing that concerns me is the multiple dwelling laws. If you look at, and if you could look, do you have the thing that I sent you, the
Yes.
picture of, you know, particularly Tennis Island and how closely the lines are? Sky, do you have that?
I saw it today.
Did you see it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw it.
And so I called up Jefferson County and found out that it's 12.6 acres of land, and we have 39 homes on it. We are highly, highly densely populated, especially in the summertime when people are there, and then they, you know, the owners have their children and their families there, and then we have these businesses, et cetera. And when Jerry put in here, originally in the document, that multiple dwellings, 3 or more per the town of Alexandria definition, that the people who are in that one building have to agree 100% to have STRs. Now, that doesn't affect all of Tennis Island, because there are duplexes on Tennis
Can
Island.
you back up,
Yeah.
just repeat what you said for a second, I got distracted.
And, sure, let me just read to you what it says in our draft. Jerry, do you know where that is particularly?
Yeah, it's under standards on page 8, or, let's see. Dog insurance complaint.
Multiple dwellings is G, page 7.
7. There it is, yep, page 7.
Could you read that for me, please? I don't seem to have it in front of me.
Short-term rentals
Oh.
shall not be permitted in multiple family dwellings occupied and owned by 3 or more families living independently of each other, unless 100% of the owners of all the units agree to allow short-term rentals.
Okay, that's what's in there now. If that is,
That's what's in the draft now.
yes, correct,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's, yeah.
And so when you have this situation that we have, and I'm sure it's pretty particular to us, I'm not sure that this really applies to, and there are no public roads to get there or to leave the island. It's all private, so we have to maintain our own, bridge, and we have to we don't have any water sources, and I showed you a picture of that one,
There would be no any water sources.
other than the river. Other than the river, but we don't have any hydrants.
Mhm.
In a highly densely area like that. We had this one guy, the older Mr. Coast,
Yeah.
elderly gentleman, it was a really cold day, winds were blowing, and he put the heaters on in his house, and that morning, the whole thing just went up, and it took out the other, what was that the guy's name, Jerry? He had passed away, Mr.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Jackie's husband.
Jackie's
yeah.
husband, and took out
Yeah.
half their house. And had that wind been blowing, because Wellesley Island Volunteer Fire Department has water being pumped into a bladder, the bladder being pumped into the tanker then going onto never even touched it. Thank God that Alexandria Bay, 3 women came in their fireboat and put that out. And if they had not done that, Tennis Island would only be history at this point. So when you have situations like that, and we don't have potable water, that's another issue. But it's a private island, so it's highly dense, and then you bring people in, and now you've got 4, and then I've got another picture that I showed you.
Was the guy that started the fire a resident?
Yes.
He was not a short-term rental
No.
So
person?
No.
you,
No, he wasn't.
this,
He'd be concerned about the residents too. I mean,
Oh, there's no doubt about it. We absolutely are. We have our building, our one building, next door, where we share the common wall, they have a fire pit on the deck, and the overhead is the balcony. You've got a balcony, a wooden balcony from 1983, and a fire right underneath it.
why don't you have a homeowners association?
We moved in, they don't have one, they don't want one. We asked them if they wanted one. We did a, survey, and they don't want one.
So, when you moved in,
Why did you buy that?
you understood, though, that there was
Because there
no
were no renters there. We were told, I'm so sorry, I just want to answer
No,
this
yeah,
question.
no, that's fine.
When we moved there, we were told renting was forbidden. You were not allowed to rent, period. And it says in our covenants that you're not allowed to have any businesses. So you can't have any businesses, but they're still businesses.
Who were the covenants made? I mean, who's,
1983, Ron Sharp
So
and...
is that, when you say covenant, it's part of the deed?
yeah.
It's part of the deed, but it's not enforceable. It's not enforceable, and there's no homeowners association to enforce them.
But when you moved in there, you knew there was no potable water, you understood the
We
location
did not
and
know that
everything.
because we didn't get anything from the health department, we just recently got.
But your attorneys should have
Well,
laid all
we
that
knew that
out
there was
and
a-
also
wait a-
laid
we-
out the
there was
potentials.
there was water,
What they
but we
should have done
didn't
and
know,
what happened.
we didn't know that it wasn't filtered. We didn't know of the Giardia, because we hadn't received any documentation, and only recently it was the health department 2 years ago or so.
But listen, aren't we spinning off into something that?
We are, but the point that I'm trying to make
no
is that,
application?
well, the thing is that we have to decide how we're gonna deal with multiple dwellings.
But so, you have this entity that existed before you were there.
Mm-hmm.
The rules and what could and couldn't be done
Right, no
were in
rental.
place, and you bought into that.
No rental.
And I'm not saying that I would be comfortable,
Mhm.
but what I am saying is that other people bought in there with the understanding they could do certain things, and they were allowed to do certain things. And what this does is change those after the fact. And if you don't do it through a homeowners association, or they don't want to have a home,
They don't want
most
one.
people don't want to have a homeowner association.
Right.
You know, you backdoor it into here, just trying to outlaw things, that's
Well,
We're not backdooring it.
No.
The STRs have come about after we moved in there.
Right.
but you are, as far as your
Nothing new.
community goes, and those type of dwellings and that, they were
But
allowed.
But it's not
But
an
I think it
unusual
also-
idea.
I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying in those circumstances, I don't know,
let's state two things.
But it also goes back to actually the same point that you were trying to make before with the fire pit, that, we're not, you can't box everything or put everything into one box. So for a highly dense,
Populated,
populated area, I think there needs to be special consideration. Jeff and I were talking about this before we came over here tonight, because I wanted to ask his opinion, and so I'm trying to put myself, you know, if I'm a homeowner over there and trying to enjoy my property, and there's people that are on their vacation, would that be something that I would enjoy? So, I mean, I'm trying to see both sides of it.
just for clarity, I'm not saying that you're not entitled to the 100% total peaceful enjoyment of your property without being disturbed. What I'm saying is that their ability to do the short-term rental was there before.
No, it
And-
wasn't. No,
Well, it was never outlawed before, there's nothing to stop them.
they,
Well, that's because it didn't exist before.
It didn't.
when
STR
these-
didn't exist.
Well, it existed, I believe, but it was not
Not as
propagated
prevalent.
to the extent that it has
Yeah.
been since the origination of VRBO.
People have been renting as long as I've been up here,
Certainly,
renting their
it
homes.
certainly
for
wasn't,
some time.
it was
Yeah.
not
From
common
here.
in
So it's just not
1986.
through the Airbnb and the
right, and the thing is, it's, and when you're renting it, you know, most of the people, not most, and I don't want to talk like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But they were saying that 30 days was generally
Yeah.
what was permitted.
Well, I was
And I'm
agree
not
with that.
saying everywhere, but 30 days, and then you get someone coming in who respects the neighbors, are gonna be there for 4 weeks, they wanna get along with the people, versus, I'm coming in for a week and this is my yearly vacation and I'm gonna have a
I'm not
blast.
saying there shouldn't be
But I do think
more-
there are particular issues with multiple dwellings, which is
Uh-huh.
why many of the STR ordinances that are out there focus on multiple dwellings.
Right.
Because you are more you're closer, you know, physically to everybody,
And you're-
that it makes it hard to have, you know, it makes it hard to have
That's
short-term
right.
renters.
And in your
when you're trying to
circumstances, I
put
think that's
5 or
where
6
things should
people
close
into a
down, or should
unit.
far stricter rules to protect you in your environment to the highest degree possible, but outlawing them,
Well, let me throw this
That's
out.
Oh, wait,
Go ahead.
if I may.
Okay, sure.
Then maybe we need to, or the town needs to, which this is kind of beyond our, I think, the scope of what we're doing. Maybe you make a recommendation or make a suggestion for the town board to examine it. Maybe Tennis Island or a place like that, if there's another one. TI Park comes to mind, but that's another town, thank God.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe they need a special set of
Yeah.
regulations.
Because understanding, and
And I don't know if the town can do that, but I'm just saying, it kinda goes to a zoning issue.
Sort of.
More
But
aspect of
mind
that.
you, that the town of North Alba did take into consideration in their new law of 2023, that they did in fact say, in residential areas, we will not allow STRs. village and town in residential, because and if you read that, whether you did or not, I don't know.
I did.
I haven't had time to go through it yet.
Hotels and motels, if you have an unhosted STR, is very similar to a hotel and motel, and they are not permitted in residential areas. So therefore, STRs are no longer allowed
within the village.
within the village and the town. You'll see it, it's in there.
Let's see, STR owners with,
The residential district.
Residential districts
just
of
says
the town.
unhosted permits wouldn't be issued anymore in residential districts within the village.
I'll have to point it out to you, Stacy.
Okay.
But it is
They
in there, and I
blanket
will point it out.
outlaw them?
Yeah, they're not gonna give any
In the
more,
village.
permits. And so and then that's the other
So the
reason
stuff that's
they have-
grandfathered in is still there?
Right, and then the only thing, and what they did to that is that they said, if you already have a permit, not going under the wire, but if you already have a permit, and that, with that law on the books, you cannot have your child own it, it cannot be moved on to a different owner. You're the owner, that's it, it's done, your LLC is done. Once that is sold, you cannot sell it that it continues on. That was another thing they put in there.
So the town
To stop it.
has, apparently they have identified non-compatible districts
Right.
for the purpose of STRs. So it says unhosted permits would no longer be allowed in residential areas which the town identified as non-compatible districts for STRs.
So this STR committee in the town of North Alba did do zoning type issues. They didn't wait for the zoning board to go out there and start looking around.
So since there is no permitting requirements now, and they have been, how long have they been doing that?
We've been fighting with them for 2 years, it's going on their third summer.
That they've been renting? It's just one? There's a couple of them over there, right?
There's one now in
Martin's
our
there,
forest section building, we're at the ends, two ends. The two in the middle, the guy's from Texas, he moved in about 3 years ago, not moved in, he bought it, redid it, and he says, listen, we know that rentals aren't allowed, we know that, but we're gonna retire in 2 or 3 years, depending on my husband's contract, and we wanna try. And I says, yeah, Lil, but rentals aren't allowed. Mike, rentals aren't allowed. We know they're not, but.
Not allowed by who?
They weren't allowed,
Well, who says that they're not
In the
allowed?
covenants you're talking about.
there's not allowed businesses, but.
Well, that's because you're
So,
classifying it as a business, yeah.
You talk to anybody in the
Short-term
neighborhood, and they'll tell you, rentals are not allowed, and we.
That was the thought back then.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so they're telling us this, and we're agreeing with them, we know that. And so they said, but if you have a problem, let us know and we'll stop. I'm naive, I'm like, okay, Lil, we're having dinner, we're having drinks, welcome to the neighborhood, blah, 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 and I am hook, line, and sinker buying the story. And I said, okay, I'll help you. So then they had these people, and they're loud, they're noisy, they're obnoxious. It goes on, and I call her up, look, there's people on Helensdock, Pete Mellon had just passed away. They're harassing her, they're watching her sunbathe. It just went on week after week after week after week. And I would be calling Lil in Texas, this is the problem, Finally, come August, I said, Lil, it's not working out. It's not working out. We tried it, it's not working out, and I really appreciate it if you stand by your word and say that you're gonna terminate, you're not gonna stop, you just keep it for your own personal use. Well, guess what happened? Nope, we're in the right here, we're gonna keep renting. So now he's got the guy next to him, our neighbor, and is telling him how much money, how lucrative it is, and now you can rent too. So now you've got private residents here, people from Rochester, people from Texas, and then Canada, Helene, who comes in. And then the next thing you know, there's a business from Utica that does rentals as their business. That's what they do in Utica. And then they bought 3 properties and rented 2. That became a problem. So the whole thing turned out to be a big mess. But the bottom line is this, is that when we purchased, it was understood, I'll leave it at that, it was understood rentals weren't allowed. And if anybody was doing it, it was on a 30-day basis and there was no issues. Next thing you know, STRs come, they're unhosted, nobody is around, and it's gotten ridiculous.
I'm not arguing that I would want to be in your situation, I get that.
But there's
I
going to
just
be
don't know.
areas that you can't have, that they're inappropriate. And this is one of the areas where it's so highly dense and populated that it's inappropriate. And then the other issue
So there's
is
nothing
that,
now that says that they can't, right?
Right.
Obviously, they would.
Right.
They
Right.
would be stopped.
Right.
So
Right.
you have all
Right.
this investment going on there, I don't know.
and then you've got the issue with, like,
Again, it's-
if you look at the island, you can see where all these buildings are, and then you have a walkway from their townhouse to their dock, and then the accompanying townhouse to their dock. Not on the front part where the castle is, you've got this big wide open green, and people walk across with their dogs and their children and their coolers and their boats across our properties, across our dock. They stop on our dock, they're fishing from our dock, they go to the next dock. It's like you're on the wrong, it's all one big thing. So the whole thing is not, it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
No, I
Not like
understand what you're
selling
saying.
I can
this.
see that.
And we're very highly, I mean, they don't have more than, much shoreline do they have there? Is it, we have like 1,000 feet, they must have about 250 feet of shoreline.
We have about 100.
Feet of shoreline?
Yeah.
Oh, it's written in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, they don't have any shoreline either, so, and they have to traverse, and they've got right-of-ways, blah, 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 so it's a whole different animal. Now, backdooring, I don't think backdooring, because if you look at this in any residential area, a privately owned residential area, people are going to bark, and this is the issues that we're having. And so they went around the neighborhood and said, do you have a problem with this? Like, yeah, I have a problem with this. Do you have yeah, I have a problem with this. And then they stopped talking to the neighbors and just went ahead and did it. The bottom line is that they are multiple dwellings, and there are 3 sets of 4, or 3 sets of 4.
2 sets of 4
2
and
sets of
3
4.
sets of 3s.
Okay. And the rest are duplexes and standalone homes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not outlawing it right
Completely.
now on Tennis Island. They still can have STRs, but if you're in a 4-unit, 1 building, or 3-unit, 1 building with common walls, then let the neighbor say, sure, no problem, go ahead and do it, it's not gonna bother me. But if it's going to bother the people who have got this common area, common, docks, that's a problem.
Yeah, but even if you're not in that building with 4 units
Yes.
in it, you're over here.
Mhm.
From what you're saying, they may be walking out onto your
Oh, they
dock over
absolutely
here.
are. They
So you're
absolutely
not
are.
part of that, and now you've got a problem
Yes,
with
that's
what they're
absolutely
doing.
correct, that's absolutely
So,
correct.
I think that all the people that own within that building having to give their blessing, I don't see how that's really, from a business standpoint, that's not a workable solution.
Well,
It can change to,
Well, if one owner owns all 4 units, then
you can do whatever
they
you
can
want.
do
Right,
whatever you want.
right.
But,
right. But it really is a travesty for the other neighbors who live in that building, where it didn't happen when you got there. STRs are now coming here, you live in Texas, I'm calling you from Texas to say what's going on with your place. You got 16 people there, oh, that's not good for our septic system. No, it's not good for us either. This is where we wanna enjoy our vacation and our homes too. So it's not good. So either we consider having something like everybody signs off on it, whatever, okay, or this is not appropriate for STRs on the entire Tennis Island, and we zone it just like Town of North Elba did. It's an inappropriate place for STRs.
How many places in our town would be in your situation? So where Dave Schaefer has down here, by Pine Tree, what do you call them? The little-
Yes, that
Rose,
Rose,
Bay there.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah, so do they have
The
any
ledges?
HOAs down there?
That's, yeah, the Legends,
I
right?
don't think
The Witches,
so.
that's a resort community.
No, that's-
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
you know what I mean.
Permanent, they're not
Yeah.
people's homes.
right, right.
But that,
And the other thing, to answer your question,
I
we
just
have
wonder how
been,
many people, or how many places
Are like
are gonna
that.
be affected like that.
we brought this to the town, obviously, we brought this to the zoning officers when this first went down. Once we were told, no, we're gonna keep doing it anyway, regardless of what we said. They didn't do anything about it. Then we went to the board next year and said, are you gonna do something about it? And then Mr. Thompson said, we are sorry that we didn't take care of it initially, we apologize. And we are gonna take care of it, we are gonna have this STR committee, and if you wanna be a part of it, you can. And in the meantime, because of that whole issue that they had with Sport Island and all the surrounding other islands,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Johnson purchased the island and wants to turn it into a resort, they sent it to Jefferson County, because they didn't wanna make a ruling here in the town. Jefferson County declined, said, no, we are recommending that you do not allow a resort on Sport Island. Then they said, we are not going, they put a moratorium in the town of Alexandria saying, we will not issue any resort permits
Right.
for a year, plus 6 months, unless we come up with something, to any resort permits, because we were indicating that the people from Utica who bought 3 places advertised their place as if it was a resort. There's a marine dockage, there's amenities, there's blah, blah, blah. So they actually put in there that, but it won't affect anybody on a public roadway. In other words, Wellesley Island, this will not be affecting Wellesley Island because they're public roadways on Wellesley Island. There's no public roadways on the individual islands out in the river. There is not a public roadway on Tennis Island. There is a public roadway leading from Route 100 into Tennis Island North.
No, there isn't. That's a private road.
Boathouse Road? Well, then
Private.
only Route 100 then. So it doesn't affect Wellesley Island. It doesn't affect until you get to Westminster Park, then they have a private roadway. Same thing on Thousand Islands, the other end of the island.
The other
Park, thank you. Up until that starts, then that becomes private. So the town actually acknowledged the fact that because we're on a private roadway, all right, this moratorium will continue. So they actually have acknowledged that this is a private roadway, not a public roadway. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying, and what they did with the moratorium regarding issuing permits?
Yeah, I'm not familiar, I mean, I read it, but I
So
was-
you're saying the moratorium is only for places without public roads? So if I wanted to start a resort on Russell Drive, I couldn't do it because that's a private road?
Correct. Because they acknowledge the fact that there's a difference between a publicly maintained road.
What was their point with it? Sport Island, there's no roads, period.
But there's no public roads on Sport Island, so it doesn't apply. So any island
In the vicinity.
on the St. Lawrence River that doesn't have a public road, that's who it applies to. They needed to blanket it somehow to say, as long as there's no public road, we're not going to issue any more, we're putting a moratorium on issuing permits. So they understand the issue with noise, with, you know, how
Even marine traffic.
But how does a public, well, I'm not gonna get into that.
Well, the point that I'm making is that they understand that there's a problem with private residential islands and private islands in the St. Lawrence River, and what people are trying to do to develop them now.
So the islands surrounding
Right.
Correct.
that group would be impacted
Right.
because of what they're doing
On Sport,
and the
yeah.
traffic and.
And the docks they wanted
Yeah.
to put in, and the resort area, and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So basically, I mean, because you're talking about
protecting the
changing the
residential
character
area.
of
Exactly.
that area of the river.
So it-
Changing the character.
Yes, and they absolutely are, and so they're changing the character of Tennis Island as well, which is an island with no
Right.
public roadways, highly dense,
But you're talking STR, not a resort, you know, but I understand what you're saying, but there's a
The
difference.
concept is that zoning, that this STR committee, like the town of North Elba STR committee, can mention that there are places that are inappropriate for STRs. And if you put a highly dense island with private roadways, and then, now mind you, with that, you're blanketing all of Tennis Island and other areas. It sounds very broad. If you say multiple dwellings, that you have to agree to have an STR in that 4 to 3 multiple dwellings, now you're being very specific. But it has to be addressed, one way or the other. And the caveat to this is, as you had said, Sky, that this is not a final draft. It still has to go in front of the town. It still has to go in front of the attorney. It still has to be massaged.
And there still has to be a public hearing.
Yes, so,
Or two.
yes.
No, I was just trying to understand the reasoning
Oh,
behind
absolutely.
why you're trying to, I mean, I know on a personal level why you're trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, sure, we
But
all have
there's a, you
personal-
know, there's a major impact to individuals that own their homes too, when this wasn't outlawed. So you buy a place, just like, Little's here. You know, he bought a place with the intention of renting it, to
Right.
pay for it,
Right.
while he's not there, and then, you know, then he'll move in and retire and whatnot. It might not have been capable of him doing it. If it was allowed before he purchased it, then he makes the investment, and all of a sudden, something changes. You know, it puts him in dire straits. So there has to think about how I would.
Right.
I mean, I understand that.
So you could broadly look at this and
Yeah.
say there are areas within the town of Alexandria
Yeah.
that are, what was the words that they used in town of North Alba? Inappropriate or incompatible
Incompatible.
with
Yeah.
STRs. And that would be very broad. And we could put that in our draft. Or we can say, what was in the currently now, that individually, that if you have multiple dwellings throughout the town of Alexandria, identified in the town law as 3 or more within one building, then you have to have approval from the people within that building to conduct that business. That rental.
Non-compatible district.
Non-compatible district.
Yeah.
And marine residential, islands,
I'd have to understand how their actual zoning laws are written and how this would tie into that, because I don't think this could
I would
be,
sure like to see
contradict those.
a meeting with this committee and some of the people from either the town board and or the zoning committee or the zoning office to discuss these things. And
Well, we
tried.
tried to get the enforcement
tried.
officer to come, and he won't.
As this committee tried to do that?
Yes,
Yes.
oh yes, yes, we did, right from the beginning.
Yeah, we talked to Brett.
Mr. Hanshu.
We talked to
Mr.
Brett.
Yep.
And we talked to Brett, and somebody reached out to Mr. Hanshu and invited us to come to
No, I
meeting.
talked to Brett,
Okay.
and he said that Mr. Hanshu will not be coming to the meeting.
Well, and what about Ron?
Well, I was talking not about coming to the meetings. I'm talking about having a specific meeting to discuss a particular, set of circumstances to get guidance from the people we're working for as to how to proceed.
Well, we can ask Brett to,
My feeling is that I don't think the zoning committee really wants to have any responsibility for this.
Well, when I said that, I was talking to the
they wanna be able to walk down the street at night like, watch your back.
town board and or the zoning guys, so maybe the town board, I mean,
Right.
they've gotta be well versed on this as well. Cause if we're barking up a tree that they don't wanna climb,
So maybe at this point, I mean, I think we have a very good base to start with. And seeing that we sort of keep kicking around, you know, we keep coming back and we keep rehashing and kicking around some of the same topics, maybe at this point we present this to the board and say, look, this is what we have to start with. Let them take a look at it, let them digest it. If they want to set up a meeting with this committee to review anything, that would be great. But I mean, that's sort of the feeling that I get at this point, is how much more do we really have to add on to this until we know where the town is coming from and possibly where the town's attorneys are coming from.
I agree.
with what you're saying is, I would like them to be able to review this and maybe discuss it with us to understand the context
Correct.
of certain areas. And some of it's pretty cut and dried.
Right.
Some of it context and understanding of the why could be important and in fairly moving forward.
But I feel like we can keep spinning our wheels.
Yeah.
You know, for weeks on end, without having the town input. I agree. And that's what's gonna happen, so.
All right, I have one question, and this is kind of specific. If I can find it, hang on a sec. With the multiple dwellings, where did I see that?
Page 7,
Well, there's a couple of places.
well, the one's a definition
Definitions.
from the town.
Where's the one that talks about it being a, oh, here's the one, it's under dwelling, not multiple dwelling.
Page 2.
Which I would think dwelling, multiple family.
Yeah, there it is.
would
That's right
still-
there, D.
Would still fall under dwelling.
Well, it's just,
Okay, but the term does not include tourist accommodations. What the heck does that mean?
you took that from the town.
tourist accommodation is
But that's what we're
campgrounds.
talking about, tourist accommodations. People renting to be here, they're tourists.
Well, that law was written in 2010, and that's the law that's currently on the books.
That's a definition.
That's not ours, that is from the town of Alexandria
But
law.
to me, when I read that, it disqualifies it.
I understand what you're saying.
but
Yeah,
because
that's
people.
kinda weird, because if it's trailers, which could be an RV, which you would
Yes,
understand that,
yes,
because
yes.
the mobile homes are not
So those
dwellings.
are 2010 definitions that are on the books now?
But when we're trying to incorporate this into what we're doing here,
Well, that's a good point.
it makes a lot of things
Try
move.
to rewrite those?
I offer the question.
Yeah, no, that's a very
All right.
insightful
I mean,
question.
I can take that out, we can take it out.
I was just gonna say, do we need it in there?
Well, when we were following, both of those two townships, they did have
Right.
definitions, and I think that it's,
Well, that's something, that's a question again for town board, whatever, and say,
could we put something in?
what do you mean by
Right,
this?
let's leave it in, because if this is gonna go to the town board.
Right.
Okay.
Because, you know, this makes, that ordinance is from 2010.
Yes.
And it might be, look, this is 2023.
Right.
Maybe they will say that, okay, that ordinance now needs to be revisited and updated.
This document could be submitted to with, a cover letter, so to speak, that may list questions that we have about what we've included based on the town laws currently in effect.
Right.
Well, let's move on, if we can. There's one thing that I had a question regarding the appeals. Appeals came from the town of North Alba, I think, did I put it in there?
Yes.
My question is this, and I sent an email out to everybody, and not that I was expecting a response, but the appeals thing is huge. They put in this whole big section about who's gonna be on the appeals board, and this is previous to going to any local criminal court. And then you can have 5 years you have to be on it, one person has to be from the district. I think they changed it to
I think
by the
Court
way.
should chair that.
Oh,
wait, he's not here, is he? I'm kidding.
But, so then they had this whole big thing, and I thought to myself, well, don't we already have in place a zoning board, and a zoning enforcement board of appeals, and I called up Brett, and he said, yes, we already have a zoning board of appeals. So aren't we duplicating and adding one more level of bureaucracy if we already have something in place that deals with appeals?
So, yeah, we could,
I mean, if you read it, it's really very long.
It depends on the volume,
$1,000 fine,
Right.
$2,000,
Depends on the volume of activity that-
$3,000.
and it also depends, I have no idea what kind of problems the town of Belleville was trying to, address. You know, maybe they had 500 problems a year that were called in, maybe we have 10. And I don't know, they're just numbers. But maybe that's why they said, you know, we're cutting all the baloney. We're gonna make some serious penalties for non-compliance or whatever it might be. I don't know. Do we need to go there? I don't know, we don't have that data.
well, we don't know,
One of
because
the-
if we have 10 this year, are we gonna have 20
Yeah,
next year?
but we don't have,
Right.
Well,
we don't have the data to
Let me
make that
answer your
Right, we
question.
don't.
Let me answer your question. I did contact the woman, a councilwoman who was dealing with this. And I want to just indicate to you what she said.
What was that?
I'll tell you in just, give me 2 little
Sorry.
baby seconds. Okay, her name was Emily Kilburn Politti, and I asked her, I'll just read what further I emailed Emily Kilburn Politti, Councilwoman, Town of North Alba, where they, quote, essentially ban any new STRs from certain residential districts, end quote. Ms. Kilburn Politti advised, we took a look at our existing zoning districts and worked within those. The 2 district unhosted STRs are not allowed are town residential and village residential. This is the zone. These 2 districts do not allow hotel motel as a use, which we argued was similar to the unhosted STR use, and they have small lot size restrictions. We have seen, this is to answer your question, we have seen over the years that the most complaints about STRs come from these 2 districts, primarily because your neighbors are very close because they tend to live there. Hope that helps. Good luck moving forward.
That all makes sense.
But what has been our problem here?
Well, we don't
We're kinda getting into it, but I was kind of addressing that $1,000 fine, a $2,000 fine. Maybe you wanna have people, I don't know.
No, ours says 350.
No, I was talking
Jerry
about, I was
actually changed
reading,
that to
I was
lower.
reading the town of Elba,
The question about,
which were referenced.
Right.
So then I was trying to draw a comparison, what has been their situation that drove their committee's recommendations? And what do we have, what is
Well,
driving
we don't know
us?
yet because
An unknown.
nobody's
Well, no, it
counted.
hasn't been an unknown because Brett addressed the committee with it and said really there were very few. Maybe there were very few that were reported, I don't know.
Right.
so
He
you
knows
had brought up though about the appeals.
Yes,
Starting,
getting back
So,
to the field.
so,
It's a starting point as well, what we've got there.
Yeah.
So,
so
Get it out.
from, if you transact any business, you're always, in a situation where eventually you're gonna end up, and it's a long process. It's a slow process. And it's a cumbersome process, and I think that's, this is my personal thoughts, just based on my experience, interaction. I've always had I think my requests have been reasonable, so I really haven't ever had a problem getting the variances that I needed. And I would be ahead of time to find out what their thoughts were to make sure I was here.
I'd agree with you.
When in this case here, I'm trying to think of what, so maybe I want a variance where I can run a fire pit, later, pick a subject, but something is reasonable for the circumstances. I wouldn't want to wait 3 or 4 months to get a decision on that. So if I was running my business, I probably would set up a committee, but not to burden the committee. These are relatively simple things, I think, that you're going to be engaged with most of the time. I would probably have a big enough committee where you could have alternating, so it would move fairly fast, and then, so say you had a meeting twice a month, you could be assured of getting it in relatively quickly and getting it resolved or know what you can and can't do, because everything.
So are you advocating for an appeals board?
I think I would, because they're gonna be more tuned to these specific issues only, and not such a,
And let me
the
say
zoning's
this too.
huge.
I found out, and I did not know this before, is that there are only about 3 townships in Jefferson County that actually use what they call the E360 or C360, where Jefferson County actually, just like with Fort Island, they took that information when they wanted that permit for the resort, and they sent it to Jefferson County, and for their recommendation, Jefferson County said no. Brought it back, because it's the same that's ultimately gonna happen here. We don't have enforcement officers. The enforcement officers for building code and fire code is Jefferson County for the town of Alexandria. I didn't know that. I mean, I just came across that information.
Historically, we used to do our own, it cycled back and forth for a while.
Right
And
now, we don't.
No,
Jefferson County's it.
Well, here's
They
the
defer
deal,
to-
you've got, if you wanna get a building permit,
Yeah.
if you wanna get a variance, just do this, I got a building permit in the window. I wanna get my inspections, I go to the county, Jason Crump or one of his
Right.
subordinates comes out, does the inspection, and approves or says, no, you've gotta change this to be in compliance. So, the town is the issuing agency for the building permit, for any variances required, et cetera, but the county is the compliance officer.
Right, that's exactly correct. I
and
did
that
not
works for
realize-
building and codes, it works
Yeah.
for fire.
Fire.
You can't expect Alexandria Bay to have officer, even the town is difficult. We used to have it, but there were a lot of problems
So
there.
if we can't expect it, and we have zoning
We're
enforcement
not
officers
talking about
aren't
something
doing it,
that's that complicated.
so.
You're not, building and codes, that's you go through that, that's complicated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
there, it's a full-time job, it takes special training and coming from the industry and that's different than the STR. We're talking about
Abilities.
relatively easy and simple decisions that need to be made on the vast majority of cases.
Okay.
I don't know why we need to get that
So I guess the
complicated.
question is,
I certainly don't wanna go to the county.
Do you agree with the appeals board of 5
Yeah,
people?
let's actually look at it, okay?
It's on page 9. Do we wanna leave it in there and then let the town decide how they wanna deal with that?
I would say leave it in and let them
Okay.
just, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
They're gonna have to decide on the structure anyway, because right now there's also no enforcement officer, so, you know, there's,
They have to
they're gonna have
create that,
to figure out
right.
the structure of the whole thing.
Right.
The only thing that I would disagree with, is a 5-year term. I think
that's
that's
excessive.
very long.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated. All they have to do is, I mean, if there's that many units, and I don't know why you have to go through as frequently as you do every 2 years, you go through all this stuff again and renewal, but if they have one guy in there that's dedicated to this, that knows this, it's not that complicated to review and hear, and a small board, they should be able to move along fairly quickly, keep
I
the
would
costs
think.
for these costs could run crazy.
Right,
So let's
so
get back to the
Stacy,
paper.
if we revert to 2-year terms.
Starting on page 7, it actually starts on page 7, and there's 1, 2, 3 3.25 pages regarding appeals.
Right, the appeals start on page 9, which is,
9, not
I would
20.
suggest
I'm
a
sorry.
2-year term, and I would also suggest
I don't disagree with that.
you appoint 5 people to start with. 2 of those people have a 1-year term, 3 of them have a 2-year term.
I agree with that too.
So you don't have,
You're not turning over
Right.
the whole
so
board.
we're gonna stagger the
I agree with that.
terms also, okay.
They can structure it just like that they have now, but just have a
Right.
separate committee that deals exclusively with the short term as opposed to the broader zoning.
and, you know, if this becomes something that is
simple.
not,
That's up to them.
doesn't warrant that, maybe then it could revert.
To zoning.
Again.
Al, would you serve on the appeals board?
Would I? Yeah,
Sure,
probably I would.
Same thing he's doing.
I wouldn't have a problem. I don't think
We
what
already
me.
have a volunteer. We already have a volunteer.
That's an almost all
You
separate
have
issue.
a chairman.
Huh?
You have a chairman.
There you go.
That's right.
The chairman of the appeals board.
Sorry, Al.
Threw you right under the bus.
So then with that
You really
said,
don't like me, do you?
We're back to court, aren't we?
Back to court.
actually, you know what, Al, what I like is your determination. Again, Stacy, you guys have been like here every single time, involved in everything, and you bring really good points. So I'm glad that you're here, and if you
Well, a
want to
different
continue,
perspective.
that's
I've learned a
great.
lot.
Yeah.
You know, I have a different understanding of things. I'm just concerned about, I don't know what the balance is.
Overregulation.
Well, yeah, always.
I think
But it's also, you know, you're dealing with some unique issues. I deal with the same issue, but it's a different set of circumstances, you know, because it is commercial, so you that's part of your job.
Right.
You know, you're not in business, you're not running the, you know, so you're dealing with things that maybe you shouldn't have to deal with. I just don't know how to just
Well, this is why
cut the legs off of somebody
Under
entirely,
our
rein it in.
to create a balance between having STRs and keeping the peaceful enjoyment of the residents who come here and live here, and they still want to be able to enjoy their property. So we have to strike some kind of balance somehow,
Yeah.
compromise, so that we can have the businesses, because the town of Alexandria eventually, hopefully, we're getting a bed tax or whatever, Jefferson County, it's gonna bring a revenue generator. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have STRs, period, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that there are places that they don't belong.
Absolutely, that's
And
true.
and everybody's here to protect their interests,
think
and the
that's-
interests that people that they represent.
biggest-
That's part of being fair
Yes.
across the scope of the town.
Yes.
And the scope of the town is a wild
It
variation.
is,
Yeah.
it is. But the town board is gonna have to really do
Yes.
make some hard decisions and
Yeah.
figure out how to
I would,
bring everybody into compliance, you know, I mean,
Right.
I don't know how, if you have 25 or 50 units in the village, not that the village is, but you know, in the town someplace where they've been doing it for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, how do you just, you know, if you wanted to eliminate it for a specific area. Tennis Island's different, that's all, not Tennis Island, I'm sorry, Sport Island, that was all new that was coming in there. If they had already existed, and then all of a sudden, it's a problem here, it's difficult to pull that apart, and I personally don't know how to do it, but I empathize with what you're struggling with.
one thing with the fires, the campfires, whatever, not the ceremonial bonfires, whatever that may be, are we roasting people? I don't know. But, you know, we might hit more on the fire being extinguished properly, and then going, must be extinguished, I would have to say, I mean, personally, by 11. Just my,
I would be okay with
bits.
11.
because a lot of them simmer down before that. You come off the river sometimes, you're coming off as the sun's going down.
It gets cold.
Well, it gets cold, but it's like, you know what, a little fire, it'd be kinda fun, it'd be
Yeah.
doesn't mean you've gotta be out there dancing around like,
No, I wasn't asking for any of that, I was just
No,
asking
but
that
I'm-
if you're in a set of circumstances
saying
where
11,
you
and
can do it and it doesn't affect your neighbors, and you wanna have a good time,
Okay, so 11.
you know, so I don't know how to balance it,
I'm
so.
with you on that.
Okay, so then let me just ask this then. As it's written, and we've all had ample opportunity to read the draft as written, are we ready to take that? Is there anything else that we want to deal with, Stacy?
So I'm
Or do
just
we have-
taking a look through, North Elba's. I didn't see anything else. Well, but maybe what we wanna do is have everybody, I mean, there's nothing saying we have to present this to the board tomorrow.
Right, right.
What if we all kind of went through it
Mhm.
again?
Mhm.
The next town board meeting is the 19th? Is the 19th, so almost 2 weeks from today,
what day did they have their meeting?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So Wednesday, the 19th is the next town board meeting. If we can try to get an email to the board before, with a cover letter before their meeting, I mean, even if it's on the 17th or the 18th, so that gives us a little bit of time for everybody to sort of go back through and look at it again, look at what the, proposed changes for North Placid and North Elba are, and
I think that's a good idea.
just make sure that we don't have anything else that we wanna put in there, and
Mhm.
what kind of points we wanna
Mhm.
address in the cover letter.
Yeah, yep. I agree.
Yep, good idea.
So with that said then, if I missed it, I apologize. So our next meeting then would be?
Well, I don't think we would really have another meeting, is because if we're trying to just put together a